Mine's still in Hong Kong.
Nice.
Or not
I
Transhumanity, but the other ones.
the ones that are actually out now, because isn't that one just now getting on?
Yeah, that one's in the. I didn't kickstart it. I just did Origins.
Okay.
Although it looked like kind of more of an economic game on a pack system, so it looked kind of neat. But I'm just like, budget mostly. Oh. Yeah, and so I feel bad on a couple Kickstarters because I'm sure people are expecting me to get them, and I'm just gonna have to like pass. So, like Pipelines, I'm probably gonna pass on. City of the Big Shoulders, I'm gonna have to pass on.
Ooh, that's a pretty big patch, but I guess you've already got it.
I kind of got it, and like I don't know, I wouldn't mind having it, but I'm not like chomping at the bit. But if the money was there, I would probably order it. But at
But I
this
mean,
point,
like, what if they came out with another game that looked like Arkwright? Would you buy it?
probably not at this point.
Wow, even an Arkwright.
Yeah, and not so much that it's a Euro thing; it's just a budget thing. So, like, right now, BIOS Origins is going to run about $80, and I kind of had the budget squared away with games I sold and everything for that. But like with the games I sold and kind of the cardio race stuff I did, basically I had enough to get BIOS Origins, the Root expansion, and the expansion for Time of Crisis, and that's pretty much it.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, if I turned around and maybe tried to sell some more games and was successful at that or something, I could do it. But I don't know. Like, and honestly, I'm looking at my pile of yet to play, and it's so freaking large that I'm just like, honestly, at this point, it's like uh, adding a lot more games to it is almost like depressing me.
Yeah.
There's so many to play.
Yeah, well, this Endeavor Age of Sail dude has got some really crazy cool looking exploits to play with. I mean, I'm really pumped for those, and then I've got like, I just think there's so many great ones out there. I want to play that Wendake game. I want to play the new, even though it generated a little bit of controversy, I still thought that it was pretty tasteful artwork, even though it's kind of like a like a European artist, like to depict like historical Native Americans. I don't know, like, and I know that like there's probably some legitimate concerns that like should be addressed, and like in like a future printing. Like if you look at the Salsa game, like Concordia Salsa, that box changed. It changed quite a bit. It looks a lot cooler now. And I mean, not only does it look a lot cooler, it is it's also like a lot just better for like not looking like a really bad stereotypical, maybe historically accurate, but like, we don't have to sit there and like glare at it all the time.
Yeah, the one I saw, what was it?
Image of colonialism.
Yeah, the one I saw that I was just like, it was something else. I don't even remember, but somehow the game involves the Maori culture from New Zealand.
Yeah, that like Kalatea something,
Yeah, it just has
something.
like the picture of the Maori warrior with the tongue out and all that.
Ryatea, something like that. Yeah.
But then again, like that's probably better than I think they had. What was it? Oh, why am I drawing a blank on this
From what I
game?
understand, that's actually not even like the same culture. Like that picture is like from like a totally different Micronesian or like different culture or something.
Yeah, well, it's like more of an indigenous Maori culture thing. It's not like a New Zealand thing. I don't know. It's weird, but I've watched a couple specials on it, but that's been years ago. But it's probably still better if they did it somewhat tastefully than I think that there was like a picture of that card in like I think Archipelago, and I'm just like, oh
Yeah, the tongue sticking out thing. Yeah, it was
yeah,
it was like if you were the traitor person, the sympathizer. That's the The
I
tongue
just
stuck
saw
out
that. I'm
thing.
like, maybe we should have thought about that a little more.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't pop out because it's not on the box cover. You know, it's not on
Right.
the box cover, so it's not that big of a deal.
I mean, I'm not like a super sensitive type, but occasionally I'm just like, there's gonna be some people that are gonna,
Well, you're not sensitive, but it's also not, you know, it's not like your culture that's underneath the microscope. Yeah.
Culture.
Mm-hmm.
Our culture is stealing other people's cultures. That's pretty much all we've ever done.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Andy, you have a culture that nobody wants to steal.
No. I don't know. Yeah, my culture is called Slight on the autism spectrum.
Yeah. I think we're all on that somewhere. So it's a spectrum.
I'm pretty sure gamer, like it's almost a pre-requirement of being a gamer. You have to be at least on the edge right there.
I don't know, man. You know, like, yeah, I don't think you gotta be, but I definitely think that like it can offer some supports and some structure to individuals that otherwise might find like unstructured social interactions terrifying or just undesirable. So
yeah, like what was it? I ended up getting a lot of likes on something I posted on Twitter, but it was somebody posted like, I like playing board games because I can interact with people around me and not feel bad for not looking at them in the eyes. And I'm like, and I responded to that. I'm like, yeah, me too. Like, I have a real big problem with that. Like, the only person I can really look in the eyes, like, well, is my wife.
Okay, I figured you're going to say that. I saw it coming, like, before you finished the sentence, and it still shook me to my core when you said that.
Yeah. Now, I tend to do that. Like, I tend to look down and away from people, even when I want to communicate with them.
Yeah. Oh, I agree, dude. It's I think, you know, somewhat North American to not, you know, just be, unless you're in like sort of a business type encounter or a student like encounter. I can't believe you, Andy, wouldn't be able to glare at a student. Like you'd be able to stare
down when I'm having a normal conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Then having a normal conversation, you just look straight at your feet.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Well, welcome, Trent. Okay, well, thanks for the patience, everybody who's here in the chat. We got Carter, who finished the House on Haunted Hill unlock game today. He agrees with me that it is definitely harder than the 1 out of 3 difficulty they rate it. As somebody who has failed at it myself, it was increased, you know, my self-esteem to see the group struggle with it as well. So it's not just me.
I want to personally give a shout out. Thank you to Carter for reinforcing Joe's self-esteem.
And I've got people out there that are putting it out there like, thanks, Trent, for actually makes it sound like you planned it now. So nice. There you go. All right. So Andy's going to. By the way, it's good to hear from you, Trent. We got Murr in the chat too. So they're having a discussion about Kiss, and it's fun listening to Carter, one of my students. It's fun reading their chat when he's trying to figure out, you know, Kiss the rock band, which, in case you were wondering, like that's just like the energy that Murr feeds on and lives on every day. It's what's made it possible for him to listen, or not to listen, but to game every day for like the last 1,450 days or however long it's been. And
Kiss, oh, they're old.
All right. Well, Andy, my voice is kind of in its death throes, so I'm going to try to give it a little bit of a rest, which we all know how that's probably going to go. But Andy's going to take over hosting duties. So, Andy, whenever you are ready, sir.
Oh God! All right. Now I have to like curb my natural like desire to derail everything, or we'll never get through this. All right. So, all right. Do your ultra slow countdown.
No, it's fine.
All right, we'll go ahead.
We've got some gaps here. Like the gaps should be like I should be able to see, the gaps.
All right. So, welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games, and basically the three of us talking about it so we don't have to waste time at game night.
Crushed it, Andy. Crushed it.
So, I am Andrew Dennison. I am joined tonight by the host who is trying to...
Oh, no!
Did we lose Andy?
Oh, Andy, we lost you, dude. The last thing I heard was I'm being joined tonight by the host, Joe, who is...
Yep, that's what I heard. Now zzz, and then it was gone.
Yeah, sorry, dude.
Hello?
Do you want to go from the start, or do you want to just take it from there? I mean, I don't care. I'll be listening to this beginning part, so whatever you want to do.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you now. I can carve it up if need be, dude. It's just a little bit of an intro anyway. I can delete like parts and stuff, so don't worry about it.
I'll just go with the I'm joined part. So I'm joined tonight by our normal host, Joe Salin, who's trying to save his voice. So get through school tomorrow, hopefully.
Hopefully.
He teaches high school, not middle school like I used to. So I joked about him yelling at students, but really I always had to do that a lot more. We are also joined by Trent Ham.
Hi.
All right. And yeah, that's great. It's great. All right.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to remind everybody that we are sponsored by Game Surplus, home of great games at great prices. If there's anything you're interested in, shoot Carmen over there an email. And if anyone can acquire a thing like that, he's probably the person who can pull it off. There's already a couple obscure Essen games that I've hinted he might want to stock.
Hinted,
yes. No personal.
Begged.
Yeah, begged, really. No personal stake in that at all. But in all honesty, they are your friendly online local game store and take really great pains to make sure everything is shipped, packaged, and they're in good time. So check out Game Surplus. And what else? Do we have any? Oh, and welcome to our cardboard cohorts, which is the podcast Bridge City Board Gamers, right?
Yeah, Bridge City Board Gamers.
That's amazing. All right.
Cardboard in the Classroom. Yeah, no, you're doing great, dude.
Yeah. Cardboard in the Classroom as well. Check them out, and they're a great listen. Also, remember to check out the Long View, as Joe is part of that, and you can... I know, but you can listen to their recap of last year's Essen, even though Joe was wrong about many of the games about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with that caveat, of course. With that caveat, everybody,
that was really
check it out
too. The Keyflower and what was it? Keyflower and John Company. Everything else was okay, but
yeah, John Company, right?
Yeah.
Totally wrong about that. Well, thanks, Andy. I think Andy's ringing endorsement for that episode.
Honestly, no. Longview is an awesome podcast. Go check it out. Anyway, we're going to start our time today. We're going to do some quick reviews of games. We're going to keep that a little bit short this time to save Joe's voice, and me and Trent just have some more initial thoughts. We're going to then talk about a topic in the board game industry. The topic we're going to be discussing today is kind of people and how they're related to the board game industry and whether that's kind of sustainable. And I don't mean the industry as a whole, but like how do individual publishers stay in it? Can it support that many, as well as content creators? Because some people, weirdly enough, want to do this for a living and get paid for it.
Yeah, who does that? Yeah, who doesn't?
I don't know.
Who doesn't want to support themselves teaching and writing and husbanding?
Yeah. Well, and it might also be like, honestly, like being a professional podcaster might be one of the only occupations that maybe pays less than what we make.
As teachers, yeah, potentially.
Oh, dear God, if they're making more than us, that's really sad for us. I don't know. But anyway, basically the thoughts of, is this a sustainable market? Is it something that people can continue to do? And kind of related to the idea of as the board game hobby becomes more and more popular, that makes it more and more likely. But that also means that there's a whole lot more people trying to break into it. So we're going to just kind of throw our thoughts around. Note, I am not an economist. I was a biological science major, so business school, not something I don't think I went into those buildings in college. So, but just kind of what we think and some basic thoughts on that. And, you know, if you're in the chat, throw in some ideas as you think of them as well. We'll then kind of exit by hyping some games we're interested in or things we hope to play. And that'll basically be it for this episode. So let's start off with Joe. We'll let you go first so you can get it out of the way. And then you can rest your voice to like maybe get some thoughts in when we get to the topic. So
actually get a few squeaks and screeches in about the sustainability. Yeah, I'll do my best, man. The real sustainability question is going to be how long my voice holds out. But you know, for me, it's always been I've been able to approach every challenge with enough intensity. I'll just keep on just burning deeper into my vocal cords.
No,
but
I'm going to throw a little thing into chat here just for a fun. So while you're listening to Joe's review, I want you in the chat to either say yes or no on whether people will complain about Joe's voice, thinking it's an audio quality issue.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's just, I love hearing about those things. So
go ahead.
It's definitely the audio quality. It's going to be the mixing. You know, it's going to be the poor editing quality. We got a guy who edits the show now who just totally sucks. And I can say that because that's me. So the game that I'm reviewing right now is Liberatores. And Liberatores I've given a quick first look at in a previous show. And during that quick first look, I had experiences playing 2 of the 3 possible hidden roles in this hidden role game. And now I've had a chance to play the last hidden role. And I got to tell you, my thoughts about Liberatores have only improved the more that I've played it. Social deduction games very frequently give players tasks that are specifically throwing them in sort of like conflict with one another. And I feel like there's like crises that sort of come up and you're needing to avert them. In this game, it's like there is a constant crisis in front of the table. It's like I get the same feeling like we're on a boat and there's just all these leaks that are springing, and everybody has to sort of plug their fingers in, but there's one person on that boat that wants it to sink. And so, yeah, they're plugging their fingers in, but they're trying to make sure that they're in the way of everybody else so that they can keep the big holes to keep taking on water. And the way that this works in board game form is that you have a cascading row of advisors that are coming through the Senate as you are the Liberatores group that is to assassinate Caesar. And so everybody that you're sort of like seeing go through Caesar, going through his door and in and out of his influence is going to eventually dedicate themselves to Caesar's cause unless you can come up with the funding to be able to get them on your side. But that's not all. You can also hire them away by sort of paying them a slight little bribe that's going to be usually less than if you wanted to, you know, actually dedicate them to your cause of assassinating the person they're working for. And this is in the form of hiring these cards and placing them either in front of yourself or in some cases in front of other players, because these are going to be like negative effects. You know, things like they start hemorrhaging money at the start of their turns. And so the way that this game system all works is that the main way you get funding is by having to send a person to Caesar, and then you benefit monetarily and also get influence. Influence in this game is a resource that's used for different hidden roles. You have 3 different groups in this game. Everybody in the game is going to be on the positive Liberatores, I want Caesar to die group, except for one. One agent who is working for Caesar. Now, the Liberatores, though, is divided into Republicans, which want to see the coming of a new age and a new era in which democracy reigns in Rome, and they want to win as a team. However, there are competitors amongst them that want to take over Caesar's job and be just like Caesar, except, you know, it be them, and they're going to do a much better job, of course. These are the competitors, and they win alone. They're kind of like a renegade in Bang, if you've ever played Bang or Bang the Dice game. But here's how this game works. It's like got a constantly cascading row of cards that become available. And every turn you're going to interact with one of those cards. And that is going to sort of dictate the flow of the game, which means it maintains a sort of breakneck pace. It's almost like I compared earlier, it's like you're trying to sort of get across, trying to ford the river before your boat leaks. Eventually, you succumb to the leaks and sink. And it just feels like, you don't know who's who. And if you are on the Caesar side, there is such a very powerful way for the table to ensure that you will not win. Especially if they can all sort of know that you are working against them, they can all sort of group together, and it just makes the game just much more difficult for you. So it's like there are tools there that make you have to hide, but the main way that you're interacting in Liberatores, unlike other social deduction games, is not like by specifically having to read another player's, like by interacting with them directly. It's like everybody's sort of sharing in this process. Andy, you compared this earlier to like, we were talking earlier about that sort of, where are we on the autism spectrum? Because we don't want to maintain eye contact when we're looking directly across the table at people. And I would say that to a certain extent, many social deduction games result in you just sitting there and wanting to maintain eye contact. But Liberatores is like got this sort of focus on playing the game, but your gameplay is going to be read and interpreted in certain ways. There's so much interaction here because you're trying to accumulate as much influence as you can to either ensure that the competitors don't win and that your side, the Republicans, win, or to ensure that you win as a competitor. It's just a really crazy, I would say, intense experience. It's extremely short and, in my opinion, significantly heavier than its playtime. And it's not hard to teach to people. I feel like this is one of those where you can bridge people from any other social deduction game into this fairly easily. And even if they've not played other social deduction games, I don't think this game is all that complicated. It does have some card text and some understanding of abilities that becomes easier with more repetitions, but the game plays so quickly that it's not that big of a deal. And there's only ever 3 you have to explain, so it's never going to be like that bloated with all this crap going on. Everything starts simple and then builds from there. And it does all this in like anywhere from 10 minutes, because Caesar can actually win. The agent can win early, prematurely, or if the game goes to its full length, somewhere between half an hour or maybe a little more. But anyway, my review of Liberatores is totally glowing. I loved my play as the agent because it was like I had to work so subtle. If I was ever outward, I got pegged as being the agent, and it was tough. So I loved the way that sort of interaction worked with me being the agent. I've seen it be really easy for the agent before. I've seen it be impossible for the agent. I've seen so many different, it's so player dependent, and I think that's really cool. The game includes the ability for you to like adjust difficulty if you feel like it's pushed too much in one direction. This game to me has everything if you're looking for a social deduction experience, but where you can really focus on the mechanisms and see how players play to sort of interpret that way, as opposed to just looking at their eyes and staring deeply, as Andy so unsettlingly made me picture earlier. So that's my review of Liberatores. It's a good one.
Yeah, I think the part I liked about it, because normally social deduction games aren't something I'm terribly interested in. For that reason, I'm not someone who lies effectively at all. So, how it generally worked in social deduction games was basically like, so Andy, we think you might be the traitor. Oh, I'm not the traitor. Okay, let's vote for Andy. So the nice thing is in this game, the how you play with the mechanisms is the bigger tell than what you lie like. So I think it does, give people who have a bad time with lying or bluffing the ability to kind of lie and bluff by using the mechanisms. So I did enjoy it more than I do most social deduction games. Like the Resistance, basically, the last time I played that, we sat down with a group and, we did the whole voting. I'm like, give me the gun. I'm not a spy. And, of course, someone's like, oh, that's what a spy would say. And I'm like, we all know who I am at this table. If you don't give me the gun, the only reason that would be is because you're the spy. So,
yeah.
And that's basically how it works. So this gives a chance maybe for someone to play a deduction game who's not good and necessarily at the bluffing, lying, social interaction side of it. And I like that a little better in games. I don't particularly like games where you have an innate skill set. If you come in with, you're automatically a better shot at it. Like trivia games or word games for me are just a disaster.
Or dexterity games for me.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I did enjoy this one quite a bit. So next we're going to do a discussion, kind of some initial thoughts on a game Trent and I played this last week. Trent, do you want to do the description for it, or do you want me to go with it?
Go for it, Andy.
Okay. So Trent and I played the game Hands in the Sea this last Tuesday. So Hands in the Sea is a deck building game. There's also kind of a map, so it's got a little bit of an element of sort of dudes on the map, and the deck building is how you control your empire. So it's basically Rome versus Carthage during the First Peloponnesian War, if I remember correctly.
First Punic War. The Peloponnesian Wars were later.
Yeah, so First Punic War. So Trent played Carthage, I played Rome. We did find out that they are a little more asymmetrical in the base cards the deck starts with and what you can do on the maps. So there's a little bit of asymmetry going on in how you're going to approach those things. Now, the thing about this game that I really enjoyed is the deck building was a means to an end. So like you're building an engine out of your deck, but the point of that is so you can do things on the map. And for me personally, I much prefer deck building when there's kind of a reason to do the deck building. So for example, if I want to become more militaristic as Roman, I'm Rome, why wouldn't I want to be more militaristic? I start buying legions and I put them in my deck to go do things. There's ways of thinning your deck in this, and it's not just, I play a card and I discard 2 cards or something. You have a stack of cards called an Empire deck that is unique to you, so you can recruit more cards out of your Empire deck. There's some common decks you can get things from as well. But I can put things into my Empire deck. But the nice thing is I can ultimately go back and get those back out again using some of my actions. So let's say I have a character not doing me much good right now. I can slip that over into the Empire deck for an action, and then later on, if I'm like, oh crap, I really need that territory again, I can just go in, pull it out, throw it in my discard pile, and bring it back up again. The other thing that's really cool in this is there's a reserve pile that you can reserve up to 5 cards in, and then you can pay 1 silver per card to pull them back into your hand. So like Trent and I, due to some scheduling things, we ended up playing this game over a couple days, and I thought about that, over that time. So what I started doing is every time one of my legions would come up, if there wasn't an area I directly wanted to battle, I would slip that legion into my reserve pile. So there was a couple times where I just paid $5 and like I had a giant murder ball of a hand ready to either massively defend a territory or basically overwhelm another territory. And that's kind of the crux of this game. So you're going to win the game by basically capturing territories, winning battles, different things like that. And your deck is how you accomplish the things. And it kind of feels a little bit like maybe A Few Acres of Snow, although I haven't played it, where like the bigger your deck gets, the more unwieldy your deck gets, so it becomes kind of tricky to get what you want accomplished. But there's a lot of depth of strategy to this game. Now, the one thing that might bother some people, though, is there are random events. So when a round comes up, you kick out a random event. Sometimes you roll, and sometimes you may get hurt by it, and sometimes it may do nothing. Sometimes rolls make it so Trent always ends up with the negative side of the events, and I never have any problems. And, that was some statistically unlikely gameplay. But anyway, my general feelings of the game is this is kind of deck building as I like it. It's a deck building as a supporting mechanism or even a main mechanism, but a point of doing it. I think it's probably one of the things I really enjoyed also about Time of Crisis. I like that kind of way of doing things. And there's a lot of depth, a lot of strategy, and I think there's a lot of different ways you can use the mechanisms in this game. It's really, we really had a good time with it. And so we'll put it this way. Basically, Trent and I have usually been alternating weeks. So he'll pick a game one week, I'll pick a game the next week. And this was Trent's week, and he wanted to play this, so we played it. And after we kind of packed it all up, I just kind of looked at the box, and I was like, do you want to play this again next week? And so, I mean, that's a good endorsement, because I've got a huge pile of two-player games I need to get played. And I was immediately like, I want to play this again now that I know what I'm doing, because I think we would do things way differently. I think it's going to take you a game to maybe figure out kind of how all the mechanisms work, maybe half a game, but then you're going to need another game to like know what you should be doing at the beginning on. But Hands in the Sea, I really didn't expect much from it when I first saw it on Kickstarter. I'm just like, it's another deck building, but I don't care. I was really impressed. I really, really liked this game. So we're going to play it again on Tuesday, and we'll see how that goes, and I'll report back in next week.
I agree almost entirely with what Andy said. I feel very similarly, very positive about it. I felt like this was very much a learning game as we were both discovering things throughout it, because there's a lot of different things you can be doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have a player aid that's double-sided, and it's literally just a list of actions you can take with the 2 actions on your turn. It's not like a deck-building game where you play a card and do what it says on it. Usually they're just tools for the actions you want to do, and there's a lot of actions you can do. It's like, I think the Mage Knight comparison is right, whereas the deck is more or less just a tool to aid you in what you actually are wanting to do on the board.
Right. The other thing it kind of felt like was tramways, where you look on your cards to see what symbols you've got, and you got to make those work with you somehow.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. And you have so much power to manipulate your deck. Like Andy said, there's a place where you can put aside cards and then recall them into your hand at a later point. You can also just each round thin a card from your deck and put it off to the side. There's like one of your actions is just thin a card from your deck.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're into like trying to get the perfect deck built, you can certainly do that. You have a lot of control over that. It's got a lot of good things going on. I really think it's a good 2-player war game. I want to look forward to playing it again. My gut feeling is this would strictly replace A Few Acres of Snow for me. So I'd want to play it again before I really say that for certain, but it certainly felt that way. Because obviously A Few Acres of Snow is a 2-player war game driven by deck building is an obvious comparison point, but I just liked what was going on in this one better.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In one of my first comments, I think we were about halfway through it. I'm like, was this Martin Wallace? Because like, they were like, oh no, it wasn't, but it definitely he had to have inspired it.
Oh yeah, I think that there was some. Yeah. It's good. It's well worth digging into if you're interested. If you like games where there's deck building, but deck building isn't the focus, this is really a good example of that. And I'll just stop there.
Yeah, I very much think like the map felt like the focus, and I would have to look at the map and like figure how much money I need into my economy, and then go to my deck and be like, how can I make my deck do what I need to do on the map and get me the money I need to do it.
Mm-hmm. I really want to play this one sometime. I'm a big fan of Few Acres of Snow.
Yeah. Like I said, I think the only thing that might bother you on it, those events can be, for the most part, they weren't too bad. There was like one that Trent got hit with that was nasty, though. The rest of them weren't too bad, but yeah, the one Trent got hit with where he basically only got one action, I think that allowed me to really snowball the next battle we had and really pull myself forward a bit, I think. But the other events weren't too bad. It was maybe a little thing here or a little thing there. But
it's worth noting here, I want to jump in, that this game, effectively the game clock in this is the Carthaginian player going through their deck 12 times.
Mention that. Yeah.
Which is interesting because there's a card that the Carthaginian player always puts on the bottom of their deck. And when it triggers, it moves the game clock ahead 1 round. And after you go through 12 rounds of that, that's the end game.
Yeah, because as Rome, like you can see where your points are going to pretty much be, and I knew I was ahead, and I was basically sitting there going, "Come on, Trent, mill through the deck, mill through the deck."
Huh.
Yeah. So anyway, Hands in the Sea. It didn't get a lot of buzz, I think, when it first came out, but I think this is a really underrated game.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's all I have to say. Trent, you have anything else?
No, I think that kind of sums it up.
All righty. Forgot for a minute I was hosting, so I was like, anyway, so let's get into our topic then and go ahead and discuss that. So I've been thinking about this topic for probably 2 or 3 weeks now because being that I'm kind of doing the stay-at-home thing this year, I mess around on Twitter here and there and whatnot. And there's a lot of people in the board game industry I follow and, sometimes back and forth with on Twitter. And not all, but I would say there's, at least a few people in there that are trying to do this professionally, that they're ultimately trying to, make money, get through this. This is what they want to do with their lives. And it got me to thinking, not to discourage, but is that possible? Like, how many independent kind of groups can this hobby support ultimately, or what would go into figuring out whether you could do this for a living? The reason that's kind of, I think, an interesting topic for me, like I said, not to discourage anybody, but being a middle school teacher, a lot of stereotypically males tell me that they want to be like professional video game makers when they grow up, or like video game testers. And you're just like, is that really a thing you can do? Or like, do you think that's going to be easy? Or because typically they're like students like I was as a kid who like get distracted easy and maybe not put as much focus on their grades as they should have. I was that kid, so I feel okay in saying that. But it's just a matter of like, how can people support themselves? How much could this support themselves, and that kind of thing. So I think to kind of frame the discussion, I want to talk about different kind of groups of for lack of a better term, content creation. So there are people that want to go into publishing. So if you look at the board game industry, there are loads of people trying to independently kickstart their games. There's people trying to start their own companies. Capstone Games came out. God, how long has that been? Is that like 2 years?
Since what?
Capstone started?
Started kickstarting their games, or started as a company?
Started as a company. I'm having trouble.
Probably 2 years, maybe a little bit longer.
2 or 3, somewhere in there. And he's been pretty successful. But I mean, I'm sure there's others that, in or out, you hear about Asmodee buying off and all that and whatnot. And so there's kind of a question of can the industry sustain that many people putting out that many games year after year? And then there's also content creators on the sides of people like us that make podcasts, that do videos, that do how to plays and all that. Now, the difference, I think, between them and us is that there are a lot of people that's what they want to do with their career. They want to produce content. I don't. Like, I enjoy this as a fun little side thing. I'm always kind of weirded out sometimes when people are like, "Oh, I bought this game because you talked about it." I'm like, really? Okay. Anyway, so there's that. But let's start with kind of the publishing side of things. And I kind of talked to Trent about this topic before I did everyone else, because Trent has a little bit more knowledge of financing and such than I do due to his real job. So Trent, what are your kind of thoughts, you think, on if somebody was interested in being a publisher and making that their living? Do you think that's something someone could do, or are we reaching a point where, it's going to be harder and harder to do that?
as I described to Andy, my feeling on this is that it entirely depends on whether the board gaming market is continuing to expand or not. And I'm not 100% convinced that it is. I'm not really privy to the numbers that would really indicate that. But I don't think that. I think that the modern board gaming world is not collapsing, but I think the growth curve isn't as vertical as it was a couple of years ago. And thus, it's probably not a place where someone can probably jump in and immediately be successful unless they've got some surefire games that they're going to release under their belt. Like, if you've got something coming that you know is going to be a hit, you might be okay. But if you're just trying to start off and start publishing and you're not familiar with development and you don't have any good design sitting there, I don't think it's a good risk. I think you're better off taking your ideas to another publisher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that's going to be kind of tough, and it would be hard. I think, I don't know if everyone's done this, but I think the more recent companies that I know of that are doing it full time now did not start doing it full time. So, like, if I'm thinking Stronghold Games and Capstone Games, that started out almost as like a secondary job for them. And
side gig.
Yeah, and I've heard them when they talk about it on their either on a podcast or interviews or other things where they ended up working some really insane hours. Like, Clay, I've talked to personally a few times and whatnot, and there was a while there I'm like, do you even sleep? Like, he had 2 small kids, he was working full time and doing Capstone Games. I'm just like, how do you even? But we see that with Stephen Bonacore and Stronghold Games. He just now went full-time board games only in the last couple of years, and I don't know how long he had Stronghold Games going before that, where it was kind of like a side gig or this is what I ultimately want to do. But I think that is important also for people who want to be publishers to understand what they're getting into. That to just do that as your job, that's going to be pretty tough. You're going to have to work your way up through it. Does that make it a little bit more, Trent, like you think a small business situation? Like, if you want to start any small business, is that?
I generally am in favor of the idea that if you want to start a small business, you should not, unless you've got like a really good safety net, like the bank of mom and dad or something like that, you shouldn't dive into this initially as your full-time gig. I think that unless you've got a plan for what exactly you're going to do if that business collapses, you shouldn't be jumping into something like, especially board gaming publishing, as a full-time gig. It just, I would not recommend it. Now, like I said, there are people out there that can rely on the bank of mom and dad. If everything falls apart, they can go home to mom and dad and be, hey, or they've got some other form of wealth that they've accumulated or any number of reasons. That changes the equation. You can do things differently in that situation. I think if you're like an ordinary person with a job and you don't have a huge bankroll and you don't have something you can fall back on, I would not jump into that full time. I would be doing it as a side gig.
Right. And I think
the real struggle, I think, is that what these publishers have to do is create a feeling of need for a product that is something, that essentially, is something that we consume as entertainment. It's never going to pop up as, outside of like your sort of leisure funds. And so for that reason, creating a demand and making people sort of commit to a certain thing is, you see all these different models that have sustained, like certain levels of hobby interest. You see like sort of these like still existing, systems of sort of board game subscriptions that have just like, one of the few that's really been like lasted over time. And it's certainly not like as a main gig, but like people still pay for those Winsome games regardless of whether or not it's like, the most modern sensibilities and whatnot. But it's like, you know, trying to get people to actually commit and buy and get it to hit big is like, you have to like really start generating hype. And it's almost like a social media movement. So I would agree, like Trent, you're coming at it from that sort of financial advisor sort of perspective, because that's your expertise, man. I appreciate you sharing that. It's really like, I agree with you. Like, that's sort of like the idea, like if you're coming at this from an entrepreneurial perspective, don't count on this as an area for foreseeable growth. However, I do think that like if people are coming at it from like a design background where you went to, to be educated in game design and are looking at creating great games, there is places where, like there is places where game designers are being absolutely cultivated and are creating like a successful business. Like, for example, Fantasy Flight has a huge team that works under it, and you're seeing other pockets of developers that have been very successful within maybe their localized markets, but it still is enough to sustain. But it really is just like these really small, like that need is so much, like once it's been filled, is there any reason to really continue trying to expand that market, or is that one of those where like people get good and it's okay?
Well, maybe related to that, I was thinking about, because you kind of talked about, building your market, your area in the hobby. And I think for a lot of companies, the base thing they always start with, like I think Stronghold Games started this way. I know Capstone did, where they started out by printing out, they started out by publishing reprints of games they knew there was a demand for. And then transitioned from that into doing maybe some more of their own stuff. And Clay's kind of with Capstone now starting to do that. I think Steven did that a long while ago. But I just kind of wonder too, is like, though, as more and more people do it, the thing I wonder is, does that make it less likely for anyone now trying to do it to succeed? In the sense that, have all the niches been filled by people who already got there, or is there plenty of room in these niches, or new niches left yet to exploit?
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe like I know that when Tom Vassell first said, like years ago, that if a game is worth playing, it'll be reprinted. Like, is that happening now at such a large scale that like, games are being are finding sustainable models if they need one, and even the games that you really can't get a hold of that well, like it's like almost out of the public's, out of the hands of anything that can be done, because it's either in development hell or is in contractual disputes, or some sort of a thing like that, where like those are the only games that we're not seeing that we should be. Is it that it's grown to where the niches can be actually filled? And then if that's the case, then does that mean that like we're due for a collapse?
Well, that's kind of what I was wondering, is like another company that has kind of blossomed in their way or whatever is Hollenspiel, by tapping into this like sort of eclectic war game economic sort of oddball game thing. And I think, that there wasn't a lot of service in that area, and they've managed to make that their business model. But then the question is, if somebody else sees that they did that and then says, oh, that's a great place to go, I'm going to do that too. By adding in these more people, does that then increase the likelihood that all will fail? You know what I mean? Like, if, per se, Hollenspiel was just barely making it, and then someone starts kind of taking the share of the market over to them, would that end up in both of them essentially failing, and then that audience is no longer being served? I mean, there can, if I think about this, like money is a finite resource for the most part. There, only so many people can exist within a market. And it'll be interesting, I think, to see how that kind of shakes out. But I think people need to go into it with their eyes open, so to speak, and how they're going to do that. So any final thoughts on maybe the publishing side of things from you guys?
I think that there's like a perspective that really like I feel like there's like almost a sort of zeitgeist of the gaming hobby, meaning that there's like a sort of place where the spotlight focuses in, and that, you know, that spotlight is wide, and so it still encompasses many other little spheres, right? But like that zeitgeist still does tend to shine lights in other directions at times. And for example, like, you know, there are certain types of games that do fall out of favor, and I think that people who are members of those types definitely sort of build a certain curmudgeonly aspect towards the hobby, because they see that like the innovation within what they're looking at isn't pushing in the directions that were like the reason that they really got interested in the hobby. Like that, it's almost like they're sort of like, you know, remnants of a bygone era. And I think that just depends on where you're at right now, like where you're at and what games you're looking for and what games you see the hobby putting out in droves. And I think that the gaming will continue to expand, but it will also sort of lose some, you know, it will leave some empty mini balls, you know, to make like a nice little Rust Belt Midwest reference here. It'll move on, and yeah, the town's like technically growing, but when you drive through certain parts, you think, what the hell happened here? You know, because like there's just, you know, no love shown to them anymore. So I think that the focus, like in 20 years, I think that the people will keep getting drawn in. They'll keep getting drawn in because they'll find something they love, and it'll be tied together with an experience, and that experience is tied to a human connection that will captivate people and entrance them the same way that it's done to you and me. But I think that the other parts, the sort of details about it, will be tied to different currents. Think of it sort of like a literature movement. You look at different sort of like genres of literature that emerge if you ever study literary theory. And it'll be like, for example, in Spain, there was an entire generation of people that were just absolutely devastated by the Spanish-American War, as they call it, el desastre, the absolute disaster. And so that birthed this generation of literature that's like really cynical. And it has some very like, you know, like sort of breaking the fourth wall, sort of challenging the means, you know, the actual medium itself. And I think that like the same way, events that happen in our lives make us more or less susceptible to certain types of gameplay. And as a culture, it makes certain things hit at certain times. You know, like I think that, you know, maybe in 20 years, the gaming that the hobby is expanded to won't be what you or I got into this for. And so we'll see it as being gaming is dying, but really it's just changing.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, maybe one more question I guess I have is, and this is just a related thought. Can there be evergreen titles anymore? With the sheer number of games being printed every year, is an evergreen title a thing of the past, or do you think that those will continue to come up?
I think there are definitely going to be evergreen titles. I don't see Ticket to Ride going out of print anytime soon.
A Sewell, dude. A Sewell is to me like
I think that'll be around for a while, yeah.
Oh man, like I think that is the first game since I've been in the hobby that I really think. I mean, I've heard people say things like, "Oh, Splendor's amazing," and now Trent, I don't think Splendor's as bad as you think it is, but I also don't think it's as good or as you know, like it's so Melbatose that I'm not a fan of it in any real way. But like, you know, people went crazy over Splendor.
Play it, yeah.
But to me, a Sewell is like, you know, I don't want to go crazy over it because I don't want anybody to have like ridiculous expectations. But like that to me is a game that's just like, is there anybody who dislikes this game for its gameplay at all? Or, you know, is there anybody that just doesn't resonate with? I still haven't met somebody, you know, I'm sure that you're out there that, you know, the Sewell haters are out there, but like,
I don't know. Even I played it and liked it.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, it might not look the same. And I definitely think that, you know, like you'll look at probably this new Azul expansion thing, Stained Glass Essentia, like, you know, those are the types of times like when it's just like that sort of lightning striking twice, you know, like it sure it can happen, but it's just so unrealistic or so uncommon.
And I wasn't saying I didn't think there could be. I was just throwing it out there as an interesting talking point. I think the only thing maybe if you're really thinking about this too is whether if you're going to do anything within the board game industry, be it publisher, content creator, whatever, make sure you're doing it because you want to be a publisher or a content creator, not because you want to be a game player. There's many, students I've had, they're like, I want to be a video game maker. I'm like, no, you want to play video games. Video game maker involves a lot of drudgery and coding.
And it's not actually playing the games.
No, and that's what you see. Like the people that are being new publishers, they, from when I hear them talk about the side of the hobby, like they're like, oh yeah, that looks like a great game. I haven't played any games, man. Like they're always busy, trying to do that. Or in the case of Hollenspiel, I mean, it's almost a constant playtest cycle for them. They don't get to play many games outside of what they have to develop for their business model. So
I think, Andy, I got a thing for you, man. I think that Hollenspiel is a very unique publisher. And I think that here's the thing, dude. I mean, this might sound weird, but I think that honestly, a game like Table Battles, if you put that game, you put a bunch of, frills on it, you could have something that people look at in a similar way as like a dice version of Memoir 44 or a dice version of just like, any battle ever. And I think that it really could have a wide appeal as like that same way that Memoir 44 sort of took wargaming and made it palatable for everyone. I think the Table Battles could do that. So I think that, like there are still abilities, like he's still, Hollenspiel is Tom's still carving out a niche for himself at that level and within his means. And I think that, the fact that people are looking past so many of the roadblocks to get to his game shows just how many individuals, how large this hobby is and how much it certainly has grown to where people are willing to, pull into those types of places. But also I think you see that type of stuff in, people that ascribe to a lot of just historical wargaming, like, you accept a paper map and you're going to have plexiglass and you're going to do a lot of the work. So, it's not like it's anything new. It's just seeing that in a different context is interesting. It's like seeing that sort of grassroots type of gaming style where the community is very much involved in the process, especially like even post-production in the process of making it playable is shows just how dedicated and you have to have a large and flourishing gaming scene for that to happen.
Right. So let's take this to the other kind of branch I wanted to talk about tonight, which is content creation in the sense of reviewers, playthroughs, other things like that. So I guess first of all, to think about that, because there are more podcasts being created. I think that you have them popping up all over the place, sticking around for a bit, kind of going away. In some ways, it's crazy that we're still even doing it for God. How long have we been doing this now?
Oh boy,
it's years, but
yeah. Well, if you count them, what is it? It's coming up sometime. It'll be 4 years. Because like weekly, if we hit 200, then we're getting real close to 4 years. We're at 188 right now.
Yeah, and like because I didn't start out as one of the original hosts. Like there wasn't when you guys started. Was there really like the breadth and dearth of like podcasts that they have now? I mean, it didn't seem like there was near as many.
There were, but I would say a lot of them that were around then are dead now.
Yeah. And that's kind of burnout. And like I said, we're not doing this financially speaking, so maybe it's not germane to the topic, but there is a lot of them now, and there are people that are trying to do this professionally to make it their living. The thing to think about, or the thought or question I have is, can that be sustained over a long haul? And what I mean by that is, if you're talking about revenue generation, right? So if you're going to do this for a living, you got to have enough money coming in to not only cover the expenses of your podcast, but your personal finances and stuff, right? So the only ways I can see that happening is either you've got to be doing fundraising, right? So you got to have a Patreon, a Kickstarter, something like that, so that the audience is paying you to do it, or you have to be doing things on behalf of companies so that they are paying you to do it. So maybe you do playthroughs like Rodney Smith or Gaming Rules, Paul Grogan. Names not great, but and stuff like that. But then the thing I wonder about on that is how many people can do that, because the margins of like profit for a game company are pretty thin anyway, right? So all of that's an extra expense on their part, and it ultimately does have to be worth it to them.
Especially if the game doesn't sell, man. I mean, so much of it's based on the game selling, and I mean, like, because of how much extra they're having to invest, that are like these features that like help sustain the game after it's been released. Like, so much of that sustaining is like assuming that it ever floats in the first place.
Yeah, kind of exactly. And it seems like people, if there's games that have like how-to videos that aren't just done by the designer themselves, are ones they're pretty sure about. Like, for example, like Scythe had several how-to videos right before it came out, right? And some others as well. And I think ultimately I see those a lot on Kickstarters, because you want some kind of video on your Kickstarter usually, and you want it to be really good. Like, honestly, the most recent one, BIOS Origins, right? I backed that because, of course, Sierra Madre, I want that. But I went through and watched it was like watch the game, see what it's like videos that they did. And they were like Phil Eklund and his partner now from Ion Game Design. And I'm like watching Phil Eklund describe how this game's played. And I'm like, oh, now I see why the rule books are written like that. I'm not sure I have any idea how this game is played by watching him do that. And I say that, like, honestly, with affection, because I really do like Sierra Madre games. But yeah, like watching it, I'm just like, I have no idea what you just said for the last 20 minutes. But I mean, that quality has to be paid for. And I know on Sierra Madre's end, their profit margins are really slim because of the kind of games they put out. They're not going to be, for the most part, huge sellers, right? Like, Sierra Madre is never going to hit a Scythe level of funding. Or if they did, I would be shocked as insane. But so they've got to do it their way. But yeah, I mean, if you saw like the next game that was going to be a Scythe and it was like a really bad video on their Kickstarter, would that affect their numbers, you think? I mean, ultimately, it is kind of about snazziness, right? If you're going to be doing hype.
Yeah, I mean, there are aspects to like the releasing of content, that like it does, like, it just not like teasers. Teasers can be everything, there has been games that have been the best-selling game of 2018 before they were even released because of all the pre-orders. So I mean, like, and those were not people that were buying games because they've seen it around and seen it played. There's not enough people that are play testing the game or seeing it in its development form for that. It's like, it's a marketing effort that's specifically been honed in to work in this digital age when, yes, we're analog gamers, but we consume most of our media in a digital form, and it's
right.
Capitalizing on where do people go, and it's like, okay, well, people go here to find this stuff, and then once we get them hooked, we can keep them here by doing this.
I'll always get them in the cult of the yet to be.
Yeah, it really is like so much, and it works because if somebody is not getting to actually play the games that they're getting, the best way for your mind to just kind of like deal with that, unless you really want to put in the work that it takes to to create room in your schedule and create or like find a group of gamers. Unless you're willing to do that, then just focusing on the next game, and as a way of sort of like just keeping that constant stream of games coming in. And many people don't have that much of a problem with having a collection that stays in shrink or that stays punched but never played. So I mean, I do think that there are some signs that we should be aware of, like, okay, like there's some things that have come out when I've been like, okay, I've had to make decisions about, I can't base my purchases on conjecture anymore. Like I have to the point where like I don't want a game coming in and then just leaving. I want to make sure that before I buy a game, I know it's going to stay on my shelf because I know I'm going to play it, not eventually tire of it and sell it, as I do with so many types of games. So if I know a game has a potential for that, I'm just like, okay, stay far away, and then wait and see what happens, right? And then until I know that I see the elements to a game that tell me it has potential to stay on my shelf, then I might pull the trigger. But even then, it's like it changes once you feel like I have more games, so that there are games that I wish I played more that just sit on my shelf. But it's like there's, so much of the focus is on other games. And it's like whenever you've got like just games that keep coming to your mind is like, I really want to play this and I can't. I think that's when it's slowly, it's like that sort of burning out. It's almost like that's starting, it's like starting at sort of like an arbitrary point in the future and taking the fuse and like lighting it there. So that way now your fuse is sort of burning towards each other, because you just keep on, every time you see a new game come out, you're like, oh man, I'm still not getting to play this game. And it's like, it's a perfect way to not buy games anymore, but it's also a perfect way to sort of flare out and lose your interest in the hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the one I always think about now is, particularly with Kickstarter games, right? And I'm not bashing Kickstarter. Like I just kickstarted BIOS Origins, but when you get a Kickstarter game and it has like the oodles of expansions already in the game, right? You're just like, when you realistically like look at that, people are like, look at all this stuff, and you're like, you're never gonna play that game enough to matter. Because like most people, I think anymore, they don't play their games. I would be surprised if there was that many gamers that even get 10 plays out of a game that they just bought, for the most part. Mm-hmm. Either that or those that are crazy enough into the hobby that listen to gaming podcasts, right? But, taking it back to the content creator and kind of the financial side of it, I remember I think it was Shut Up and Sit Down. They got asked by a local school to come do a talk on being a YouTuber. Like, because so many kids want to be YouTubers. That's a whole other rant I could have. But anyway, they basically sat down with all these small kids, and it was like weird because they did it with elementary kids or something, which was weirder. But basically all these kids were like, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to, and like Quinn's advice mostly was, no, you really should do this. Like, he
came at it from like a professional journalist perspective, like a professional, like, actually somebody who puts the time in to understand, what's good journalism, how to make a good product. And,
right.
And it involves writing script, man, and they're good at it. Like I've tried writing script before, and when I write script, people criticize it even more harshly than when I don't. And then when I don't, it's like you end up with so many rambling moments that maybe shouldn't have been a part of it. So it's, I respect what they do for sure.
Yeah, you can't bash it. Like, but here's the thing. They kind of got there first, right? Doing the whole sort of comedic review almost. So now it's like, and there's, lots of people that, and I've seen lots of like people try to start video channels that were basically trying to do the same thing they're doing. But then the whole point is like, well, why would they watch you instead of them? But and the other thing, but his point was, for the longest time, this wasn't a career for Quinn's. He's like, I didn't make any money off being a YouTube board game reviewer for a long time. Like, it's not something you can start out with as your main goal in life, I think. I mean, so much of being a content creator is going to be building your audience. And I think, that's going to take a long time to do. Like Heavy Cardboard, even, they've only done that recently with Edward, and I mean, he podcasted for quite a long time before he got to that point. I don't really know the origins of the Dice Tower that much because I came into gaming, after they had been pretty much well established.
He did it for a long time while he was still teaching. I mean, it's it's clear, it's documented. I watched his video reviews from when he was still talking about having what he uses games for, and games like Yinch were ones that he would keep at school. And most of those guys are like that. Like, it's just only recently that the content creators have really started to be able to get feet and do it as an actual profession. And I think you still see people like Trent kind of referred to that are have some sort of, either being supported by a spouse or some sort of, you could say the bank of mom and pop or whatever. But some sort of a way to where this is something they don't have to rely on for a primary income. You see people that are still attempting it as a career, and putting a lot of effort and a lot of themselves out there.
Right. And I think that's kind of important to take into account if it's something you're thinking about is, and maybe this goes to what Trent, you were talking about with, if you really want to make this a business, then you need to have to come at it with a business plan, right? Like, you can't just, I'm going to make a YouTube channel. Like, you have to have a plan. Here's where I want to be in the future. Here's the steps that I need to do to get there, so on and so on and so on. Otherwise, it doesn't really work, right?
Yeah.
And I think, too, there's a lot of people out there, and if you're going to get views, like, ultimately you've got to be doing something a little bit different than everybody else. And so, for our example, once again, we're not trying to do this financially, but our difference is we bring typically a pretty good breadth to the discussion, because so many podcasts are from the same game group, and most game groups have very similar tastes. It's just usually us that are arguing about, why are you making me play another numbers game, Andy, or something like that. But we kind of started out doing that when everyone was very homogenous.
We do that, but we do that in a way where we have multiple perspectives, but it is kind of like casting more towards the heavy side of things, where you don't see that much. You just see mainly people agreeing with each other. So I think that's, but even then, like, what we're doing is not, it's not something that I ever intended to be like floating on its own. Just, this is something where, like, we have these perspectives to share. So, definitely do not take us as an indicator of whether or not there's actually success to be had. The goal of this podcast from the first day has never been to be a financial supporter. Its sole purpose has been to share a love of games and to sort of engage in discussion that would be, kind of detrimental during a game. But I think that dovetails nicely and kind of pairs nicely with, being able to play these games. And I think that there's relevance to that from people outside to be able to hear, because, hearing people unpack ideas, especially when, you have people that sort of hold their ground against each other, can certainly help out. So, I mean, we're us, and that's it. That's all that there is to it. We're just
right. And here's the thing, like, maybe this is a question for you, Trent. Like, let's say I wanted to be a new YouTuber, right? And I say, I'm going to make a YouTube channel that I want to be my sole source of income, and I'm going to be reviewing light to medium weight Euro games. Do you have a prayer in hell of making that work?
Yes, if your voice is very distinct from who's out there, but other than that, no. You got to figure out, why am I way different than who's already out there? And if you don't have a clear, distinct answer for that, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking about. Like, it almost becomes more difficult because there are people that have now made it their careers, I think, in some of those more popular regions or zones of the hobby, and they put out really professional looking content for the most part. And if those are the people you're going to be competing with for viewership, it's going to be pretty tough.
Yeah. Why would I put together a how to play video for the games that I show unless I'm doing something different, right? Because like my how to plays are like when I watch other people's how to plays, I'm like that is so much better than anything I would ever really even want to put out. Just it's like the dedication to like graphic organizing and other things is just, like not an area that I'm that much interested in pursuing. So, people will find those things elsewhere. And you need to think like, if that's the case, then, forcing yourself to do something, unless you've got a chorus of people that are saying like, do this, you're definitely not a decision to make. So I think, Andy, this is definitely taking a more personal, like, I feel like I'm looking at myself with a hand mirror right now and going like, really, who are you? What the hell are you doing?
Well, think about is, when I have listened to people that want to do it professionally, right? That's their goal. Like they put a stupid amount of hours into that. Like the people that are really making livings at this, like they eat, sleep, breathe every minute their show, right? Like if I want to, I couldn't do that and still be raising the family that I do. We'll put it that way. Like that's just not feasible. And I think some people need to do, if that's what they're going to go into, they need to understand that up front, that if you're going to want to be a content creator and then truly you want that to be your source of income, you're going to be putting in a whole lot more than an 8 to 4 or an 8 to 5 job, right? Like the closest I can think about it would be, when I wanted to be a teacher, my first year of education, like my first true job after student teaching, oh my God, the stupid amount of hours I had to put in to just tread water. I was at school 6:45 in the morning. It was like 7:45 that night, and I don't even know where the day went. And then I was still putting on 12 to 14 hours a day, sometimes on the weekend. And if you're going to want to be successful, I think in a highly competitive sort of content creation kind of world, like that's the kind of stuff that you have to do. And then the rub of it is you could do all of that and still not succeed because just for whatever reason you don't get noticed. I mean, there's how many actors in the world, right?
There's a lot of actors in the world, Andy. Yeah.
And but I don't know.
But I mean, like movies are still around, dude. Movies are still around, and there's been a lot of people that wanted to be actors that have, like died.
What was it? Harris famous because he basically did Star Wars. And
Harrison Ford got famous doing something he loathed personally.
Well, and the only reason he even got that role was because he was working on the set as a carpenter.
Uh-huh.
And George Lucas did group auditions. He never auditioned people on their own. And the guy who was coming to audition for Han Solo didn't show up, so they basically just grabbed him off the set and like, here, read this. And they're like, oh wait, he did better than everyone we ever interviewed. Okay, you got the job.
That's
awesome. But yeah, and it's tough, but I think if you're going to do that, and I don't want to discourage anyone who that's your dream, you want to be a content creator, but I think if that's what you want to do, you need to understand what that's going to entail firsthand. You need to know what you're getting into. I don't really do much with the Dice Tower anymore, but they did a top 10 like things to know if you want to open a game store. And like number 1 was make sure you want to sell games and not play games.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this is not a good idea.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing you hear from people that put on like conventions. Like you think when you put on a convention that it's going to be like gaming for you, but ultimately it ends up being a lot of you playing a logistics game of how to make the convention work well.
So everyone else can game while you're working.
Yep, that's exactly right, man. And there's a lot of people who put in that sort of love. So, appreciate it when you see it. You know, it's like
Yeah,
one of those, if you're in an RPG session, appreciate your DM, because
oh
you know,
god,
you can sit there and gripe all you want. He didn't let me do this, or she didn't let me do this. But ultimately, like, it's,
and
you
it's
know,
someone who role played a lot as a kid.
grow up.
To find.
What was that?
A good DM is really hard to find.
That's true, man. Yeah.
So anyway, so any final thoughts on that part of the topic? I think we addressed it pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. Anything, Trent?
Nope.
All right. Well, let's go on to hype so we can get Joe to bed and he can rest and make tomorrow.
Yes.
So do you need a little bit of rest, or you want to get your hype?
I got it. I got to just get out of the way. All right. So I really wanted to switch to War Chest because it sounds like War Chest is like really, really, really good. And I'm hearing this from heavy gamers whose opinions I trust when dealing with, you know, if there's ever going to be like a game come out from a big board game company like AEG, you know, where it just looks like any other run of the mill, you know, what game came out, mixing together this thing and this thing, which are two things I didn't need mixed. This War Chest, though, sounds like it's having a really heavy impact, and much reminding me in a way like Tash Kalar, because it's like basically an abstract sort of game, but then it involves card drafting and like historical sort of units that you fight with each other. So that looks really cool. What I was really going to hype is Isle of Skye Druids, which is the second expansion for Isle of Skye, but honestly feels like it should have been the first expansion. It's a less thematic expansion than the original Journeyman expansion, which is a much like, it just basically doubles the length of the game, but does so in a very thematic way by having you actually journey through your province, whatever it is, you know, your Isle of Skye that you've built your tableau. In Isle of Skye Druids, it's just a much more like an extra buying phase. It's similar to what Isle of Skye already offers, but now you can actually accumulate special abilities, and there's always special tiles that you can buy, but those are kind of in like that sort of cascading drafting line. So Isle of Skye Druids, believe it or not, it has a more thematic name, but after reading the rules, I can tell you it is certainly less thematic than Journeyman, and looks to be like maybe more of what I would have expected from the first expansion for Isle of Skye, where it doesn't really depart that intensely from what the base game wanted, or was what I played the base game for. So maybe that'll make Druids one that I'm more apt to play with people who already like Isle of Skye, because I don't want to say Isle of Skye Journeyman because it's like doubling the length of the game, just sort of totally changing the experience. But maybe Druids will be more an expansion that I still want to play with the base game sort of crowd. Right. So that's Isle of Skye Druids.
Okay, Trent, you're up next.
Okay, I'm going to talk about PAX Transhumanity, which is a game currently on Kickstarter that's coming out from Sierra Madre Games sometime next summer.
It'll probably be S-ish, though, the way that works.
It'll probably slip. Who knows? I don't. Yeah. As I said on Twitter, I'm not entirely sure that people aren't over hedging on their Kickstarter delivery dates. Now, I think that there's actually over hedging going on a little bit. But that's beside the point. I want to talk about PAX Transhumanity. This is the latest in the PAX game of sort of simulation-ish games from Sierra Madre Games, and this time, rather than focusing on a past historical era, this game focuses on a future, but it focuses on, rather than a dystopian future, which most sci-fi and board games tend to like, it actually focuses on a utopian future where things are getting better and better and better, and we're demolishing the barriers of age and disease and suffering and physical confinement to the planet, and even eventually physical confinement to our bodies. So it deals with kind of a utopian future where we solve a lot of the problems of humanity. But what really intrigued me about it isn't so much, it's really hard to tell from the Kickstarter what exactly the game will be like, although I enjoy the theme, and I know from the past that PAX games are at least thoughtful, especially PAX Renaissance, which I dearly love. There was a update in very recent update to the game that made it sound quite interesting. And then I was discussing someone who's playtesting it with them, and he said that while he wouldn't rule-wise compare it to PAX Renaissance, he had the same feeling while playing it as he did to PAX Renaissance several times, and then he was staring at a board state that had so many options available to it that he felt almost locked down by the choices because there were enough legitimate choices in very different directions that he felt almost overwhelmed by the options, like he did at times in PAX Renaissance. And that type of thing excites me. That makes me want to play a game. So I'm more enthusiastic about this than I was. I was interested in it somewhat because of the theme, and a little bit because I like PAX Renaissance so much, but hearing that makes me more and more interested in it.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I've seen on this, maybe too, to add to it, is it looks like it has more of an economic bend to it than like previous PAX games.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of promoting your ideas to make money to then buy more ideas to promote kind of thing, it looked like.
Yes, I think there is some economic to it. And I got the sense that you're kind of building it to blow from what this one guy was describing.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, that a la PAX Renaissance, although I'm sure it's somewhat different. I got the impression that you're kind of building it to blow, and as you build that to blow, it gets more and more complex, just like with PAX Renaissance. So that type of thing makes me very interested. Economic to blow building, let's do it.
All right, I'll go ahead and finish this off. And this is a hype for a game I don't know if I will ever see, but I'm hyping it in the hopes that somebody will pick up the publishing in America so I can buy it. It's a game I heard about at Essen, and I'm kind of hyping it because we did our games we were looking forward to Essen, and this one totally slipped by me.
This one totally slipped by me was the last thing I heard. So Andy, I think you kind of cut out. This one totally slipped by me.
Fun today. So anyway, the game I'm going to talk about is Profiteers. So the shtick of this game is that you are a British arms dealer, selling guns, ammunition, and supplies to the sides in the Civil War, both the Union and.
Oh man, we're so close to finishing. You're selling arms to both the Union and
the Confederacy.
Okay.
So Civil War, right? Except you're not involved in the Civil War. You're British arms dealers selling guns to the Civil War. So you get your choice on basically whether you want to sell mostly to the Union, to the Confederacy, or you can have a factory that can sell to either one, but it produces less guns. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use money that you make off selling the arms to buy war bonds, and you can choose to buy them from the Union or Confederacy. And then you're going to actually use the guns that you've sold to basically decide who wins battles.
Nice. So you're playing an arms dealer, and you're doing this to see who wins battles. I'm sorry, it seems rude that I'm interrupting you, Andy, but it's like whenever you're freezing, I'm kind of trying to say the thing, and then you can pick up whatever it is. Yeah. We're going to finish this, man. We're so close. We're just so close.
But anyway, what you're going to do is you're going
to... Andy's internet is dead.
Oh, no. What you're going to do is you're going to... It was almost like you shut it off then just to mess with us.
No. Anyway, you buy war bonds. Did that come through?
Now it did.
Yeah, okay. So you buy war bonds, and then basically whoever wins the Revolutionary War. Oh, God, is it still bad?
You've had a couple drops. I don't know what all is going on, but it seems dodgy, dude.
Mediacom's not been kind to my house today.
Yeah. It seems like every time you start to actually review the game, your internet decides that it doesn't want this message to get to the world.
Mediacom clearly doesn't like this game.
Yeah.
CIA is picking it up.
Yeah, I think we might be. Yeah, they're the load. My internet cannot bear the load of all the government agents listening in while this game won't ever get hyped.
Basically, you buy war bonds. And whoever wins, those bonds are worth positive points. And if you have a whole lot of bonds in the losing side, those are worth nothing, and you lose horribly.
Okay, good. That sounds really interesting, dude, because it's like you never know if it's going to score or if it's not going to score. That sounds like an interesting way of scoring. I'd love to see how it plays out.
And here's the thing. Economic game with a lot of interaction and plays in less than 45 minutes.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, dude. What was it called again?
Profiteers.
Profiteers. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely one of those. I was asking myself, during it, it's like if it was set in maybe a different war, it wouldn't be so like such a hot topic right now. I wish that, maybe they could, it probably wouldn't have seemed any better, but like there are current war profiteers, there is currently, like a sort of system of war profiting that does happen in the world. And, it would be interesting to see it maybe applied to a modern conflict, or maybe a conflict that was a different one, like the Revolutionary War or something.
Here's what you do. You take this game to Alabama and you make sure the Confederacy loses.
Yeah. Go build a statue of like a Union figure in front of the courthouse there.
Yeah, you just make sure the Confederacy loses and go, again.
Yeah. Do you like the battalion from Glory, from the movie Glory, that the Civil War movie? Matthew
Roderick.
Roderick, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you should start like making all the people that were in that battalion, all the people that were in that battalion, put the statues of them out in front instead of the.
No, we had like that. My cousin was in a history class with a guy who kept saying the South will rise again because he was from like Tennessee or something. And my cousin blurted out of class, because it's my cousin, went, "Why? It worked out so poorly the first time."
Oh, and for that we thank you.
But anyway, so that's been an episode of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. Join us next week, and we'll talk about Hands in the Sea again, probably, and a new topic in the board game hobby or review or whatever we decide to do. The podcast usually starts, and then we'll do that. Good night, everybody. It was great talking to you, and we'll see you all next week.
Night.
Night.